Story 1. In my dream, I woke up and I saw 3 doctors really busy with me. I saw myself lying there, but I also found myself floating. I had a view from high up in the room. I didn't think much of me seeing these 3 doctors. I didn't feel anything, nor did I have any emotion. I did notice, however, that in a corner behind me there was a light shaped in a circular portal. It was just there. I didn't feel a strong physical pull, but it seemed logical to enter. "Hello, I'm the grandfather of your father. I was sent to meet you. You can come with me since you are allowed into heaven," a young guy about my age said. I looked at him and replied, "You don't really look like a grandfather." He laughed. "I thought this image would make you feel more comfortable, but if you prefer this." And when I looked, he now appeared to me as an old man. He smiled. I guess he tried to make me comfortable. I was fine, though. I looked around me and I was in a white space. There were no walls. We were walking as human beings on something, but not a floor. There was no ceiling either. Everything was white. In the distance, I saw a white wall. The wall was as big as a townhouse on its side. Behind the wall was a radiance emitting quite a bright white light. The white light was emitted in a circular shape, and the shape was larger than the wall. I could not see what was behind the wall. I just saw the radiant light. I did see 2 people standing on the other side of the wall. They were facing whoever was behind the wall. They were small in comparison to the wall. One was standing and was calm. The other one seemed like a very strong, bearded man, age 50 or so, kneeling and crying before the light. While we were approaching the light, I could feel it. It's a feeling I will never forget. It was pure love. So much love, it was overwhelming. I had to cry of joy. Within that moment, nothing mattered. You were accepted as you were. Your deeds or wrongdoings did not matter at all. It was all good. I snapped out of it. I was still behind the wall, walking with my great-grandfather towards the light. I don't know whether he had asked me a question, but I found myself saying, "I should go back." He looked at me asking, "Why?" I told him, "My parents would be very sad. Further, I have a lot of friends I still would like to be with, and I have a whole life ahead of me." "Then you should go back," he replied. At that moment, I was concerned with the question, "But how do I go back?" and starting to look around me for a way back. Without any word or explanation, everything went black and I woke up on the surgery table. One of the surgeons asked me, "Well, you gave us a good scare, but we managed to get you back." He paused and asked me, "But tell me, did you see or dream something?" I couldn't really talk, though. My tonsils were removed. I fell asleep again, and sometime later I found my parents and little brother beside my bed. For me, at that time, this encounter just felt like another dream. I started realizing what had happened only after the age of 40. But between then and now, other events happened. As a child, I would often ask myself what would happen in the future. Things like, what would my future wife look like? Where will I work? What will I do? And quite often, this was revealed to me in small sneak peeks into the future. In those small dreams, I saw my future self in an event. For example, sitting at a table discussing something with strangers. Or I would see a face of a young woman who could have been my wife or daughter. The realization only comes when the event actually happens, much like a déjà vu. This raised the question, if events are known years before they actually happen, what is this life all about? I still don't know the answer, nor do I question it a lot anymore. It is what it is. And I'm more than thankful of having a very happy life, even if it is preordained. People find me calm or very calming towards others, but at the same time, I sometimes enrage people without any provocation, just because I'm in the same neighborhood. For example, I was waiting on my luggage at an airport in the USA. Next to me was a nun, quite petite and of age. I could feel she was nervous, which to me was odd. She was a nun after all, but I guess she wasn't accustomed to travel. At some point in time, she looked at me, her eyebrows arching in a way as wanting to ask a question. I looked back, smiled, and closed my eyes slowly. She looked at me, smiled, and she nodded to herself as in saying, "Have faith." She was calm from that point onward. Moments later, her luggage arrived. A guy standing on the other side of her helped the nun with the luggage. When she left, the nun thanked me, ignoring the guy who helped her with the luggage. That enraged the other guy almost to a point he wanted to become violent. I also experienced moments where I apparently enraged other guys. When younger, I was often challenged to a fight while the guy was ranting. What for me was absolute nonsense, like speaking in a language I don't understand. Such moments happen out of the blue. In a library, while reading a book, having a drink with friends, and even walking on the street. For me, it feels like evil gets agitated when I'm around. Luckily for me, it never got violent or physical. But it is still strange to see people get agitated from nothing. When I was 40, I suffered from a midlife crisis and depression. Nothing really bad, I just noticed that my level of energy or drive was gone. When I was in my 30s, I founded an ICT company. I worked 12 hours a day and I was on top of everything. It was successful and I sold it. A year or so later, I started a new company with my father. During that period, the depression kicked in. I was still there, did the things I needed to do, but nothing more. I knew or told myself it is just a midlife crisis, it will pass. But it lasted years. One evening in the middle of the night, I woke up. My wife next to me was still sleeping. At the foot end of the bed was a being in human form. It had no facial or body features, but was more a being made of energy. The next thing that happened is I felt an energy in my brain. That energy was the same energy I had felt when I was in the white space. But instead of embracing me, it felt like it unscrambled my brain. My depression disappeared after this event. Not instantly, but over a period of a few months. Today, I'm still thankful for this being to show up and help me out of this dark period of my life. This story was shared by Stephen V. and happened in 1978. Story 2. My NDE occurred in 1990 at the Grand National Final Racing event in Atlanta, Georgia. I 100% believe that the reason why I had another crash in March 2010 and was in a coma for 3 months is because I did not share this experience with others. God allowed it to happen to me as a wake-up call. Not only did I gain a lot of information, but I also had a huge change in my outlook in life. I was in the front row of the motorcycle race, and I was about to start down a very sharp downhill slope. Unbeknownst to me, there was a huge oil spill from a fellow competitor blowing up his clutch in the entrance of Turn 3. I knew in order to catch the leading riders before the long straight, I had to pass this guy completely before the oil spill started in Turn 3. I didn't make it because my rear tire hit the oil, and I went down and then lost consciousness. After going in and out of consciousness for a while, I heard alarms coming from the machines my body was attached to. Instantly, I felt no pain. I was floating on the ceiling in my room and looking down at myself. Vicky came running into the room, followed by 3 other nurses. Vicky took one look at the monitors and started giving orders. "Julie, go get me the specialist on duty." One of the nurses took off running. I looked behind me and up to see what looked like a highway filled with cars with their lights on. As I got closer, I saw human figures that all had what looked like a light shining from their navel area. The highway they were on was going to what looked like a very bright portal. I felt that I had to join them, and instantly I was among them. We were talking via telepathy. I would think a question in Afrikaans or English, and I would get an answer in the same language I asked. At first, I did not think much about it because some English is understood by most people. But what made me start to wonder is that when talking across languages, normally there is some finger pointing, drawing, and some arm swinging. But here, there was none of that. There were many religions represented in my group. There was a Catholic, a Baptist, a Muslim, an atheist, a Jew, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a couple of tribal people, and me. I asked them all, "What language do you hear?" They all replied, "My language." I switched to Afrikaans and repeated the question. This time they replied in Afrikaans. I asked them what language they used when they replied, and they all replied again, "My language." What is funny to me is that I do not speak Afrikaans or English very well, but their replies were on the same level that I use in both languages. Next I asked, "Any of you guys know where we are going?" They all pointed to the bright portal. One of them said, "We are going to purgatory." I asked, "What will we do when we get there?" Someone said, "This is where we give a review of every decision we ever made while we were on Earth. See how those decisions affected God's plans and see how it affected other people's decisions." I replied, "That is going to take years." The reply was, "Time only exists on Earth." We continued for a while, then I felt an urgent need to pee. There was what looked like a rest area exit off a highway, and I felt that I must take it. The area I was in was very dark. It was so dark that I could not see my legs from below the knees. I looked up and saw a very wide, fast-flowing and deep river. Across from the river, I saw the most beautiful place. To me, it looked like a clean and well-kept park. It was much more beautiful than what I used to see as a child in the Kruger National Park's campgrounds. To my surprise, I saw my grandmother, who died 1 or 2 years before I immigrated to the USA in June 1983. I started to get in the river to try and get to where she was. I found out just how strong the current was because I almost lost my footing before the water level was halfway up my legs. My grandmother saw me but only motioned with one arm, waving for me to go away. I saw my dad about the same time as he saw me. He had died in a car accident in December 1983. My dad was busy playing with my dog, Nicky, who had died in the late 1970s. He cupped both hands over his mouth and, using his sergeant major's voice, yelled at me. In English, it translates to, "Go back, we are not ready for you yet." I turned around and started to cry as I headed back out of the river. I could not go back on the highway in the same direction I was going. The only road I could find was leading back down to earth. The major difference between this road and the one I was on was that this one had much more small souls on it. I asked why this was, and someone answered me. We are small because we have to be small as we all are entering babies' bodies. Some are smaller because they are in the testing phase. They need to find the body, family, and culture where they feel most comfortable to stay in to complete their tasks that they agreed on with God and the Holy Spirit. I asked them to explain to me how this worked. When the egg is fertilized in the woman's womb, a soul gets assigned to it. That soul can come and go as it wants. It does this via the woman breathing, and the final entry that soul makes is into the particular body it chooses. With the guidance and help from God and the Holy Spirit, it enters the baby's body with the first few breaths it takes after birth. When that body dies, the soul leaves the body with the final breath that particular body exhales. All of a sudden, I was back in my room, hanging from the ceiling. I was watching them feverishly working on my body. I watched them several times as my body jumped from the shock it received from the paddles, while they tried to get my heart going again. How long I was gone, I do not know. I decided to go back into my body, and instantly the pain was back. Later, Vicky came in with Julie and asked how I was. She told me she would like to introduce me to my new night nurse. I replied that I was okay, just hurting a lot. Then I asked, "You want to introduce me to Julie?" Both their jaws hit the ground, I think. Vicky said, "How do you know her name?" Followed by Julie saying, "I have no name tag on and I only saw you while you were flatlined." I told them what happened. This story was shared by Andre Fiv and happened in 1990. Story 3. On the morning of November 27, 2015, after working the night shift, I started to experience chest pain before going to bed. I dismissed it as heartburn. After about 10 minutes, the pain went away. I slept for about 4 hours, then was having trouble sleeping, so I got up. When I got out of bed, the chest pain started again, but this time it was more intense and wouldn't go away. I broke into a cold sweat and felt nauseous. I realized I was having a heart attack and called 911. It took the paramedics about 5 minutes to arrive at my apartment. They sat side by side with me on my bed. The pain slowly got worse, and after about 5 minutes, I started to lose my hearing. Then I lost my peripheral vision and everything started to get dark. I also lost the feeling in both my arms just above my elbows. I kept shaking my arms saying, "I can't feel my arms." Then I fell unconscious. I felt myself fall out of my body. It felt like I was peeled out from my body. What seemed like a couple seconds more, I woke up. But I wasn't where I thought I had fallen. I was in some other realm. At first, I didn't know I had died because I was totally conscious. I was in total awe and amazement at my surroundings. I was surrounded by a green mist. There was a low level of light coming from one side. It seemed to be coming from behind the mist, like I was in some sort of void. It only took me a couple seconds to realize that I had died. I found myself in a sitting position and I didn't feel any pain. I felt like I was surrounded and wrapped in a warm blanket of fog. I found myself sitting in green mist. I was alone. I saw that I was transparent. I moved my arms and could just make out the outline of them. I made out the outline of my body and I could see the green background through it. I could also see that my legs had different colored veins or lines running through them. I was so observant because I wanted to remember everything I could. I felt like I was sitting right next to my bed, even though I couldn't see it. And I knew the paramedics were working on me. I was so conscious and aware. A million thoughts were going through my mind. I was in total awe and amazement. I just sat there not wanting to move because I thought that if I did move, I might not be able to come back. Then I decided that I didn't want to stay there. After I realized I had died, I was upset and became apprehensive. I didn't feel like it was my time to go. I was amazed that we don't die and our consciousness lives on after our physical body dies. But I did want to come back. I sat there for what seemed like about 20 minutes. The novelty of my situation wore off really fast when I realized how permanent this was and that I might not be coming back. I was saying no, 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 oh no. I was torn because the way I felt was wonderful. I felt no pain. I was so conscious and aware. I was in such a beautiful place, it was so surreal. But I wasn't ready to leave the physical world. Although I am not religious, I sat there hoping and praying that the paramedics could bring me back. I fell asleep on the other side. In this dream state, I knew exactly what this was. I was conscious that I was dreaming and that I was back in my body. Instantly, a feeling of relief came over me. I don't know how long I was like this, maybe seconds or a minute. I woke up lying on my bed and surrounded by paramedics. The one paramedic kneeling on the bed next to me told me that my heart had stopped. I just looked at him and was at a loss for words, but I already knew this. I heard a lady paramedic say that my heart stopped for 1 minute. All of this happened in just a little over a minute. I was amazed because it felt like I was there forever, like time was stretched. They transported me to the hospital cardiac center where I received 2 stents in my heart because it was 95% blocked. It's been over 5 years now with no problems. I changed my diet and exercise now. It was a big wake-up call and I am very lucky to be alive. I can't thank the paramedics and staff at the hospital enough for saving my life. I learned something from this, to take better care of myself and to not take life for granted. Consciousness does not die when our physical body dies. We move on and I caught a glimpse of this. I'm still agnostic as I didn't see anyone. But after what I experienced, anything is possible and I'm a lot more open-minded. This story was shared by Dave M. and happened in 2015.
Story 4. I was 16 years old. I had been admitted for general surgery to remove 4 teeth that had grown through the roof of my mouth. I was taken down to the operating room. There were 2 nurses in attendance and an anesthesiologist. All were fully gowned so I could not see their faces. I was sedated. At some point during the surgery, my heart stopped and I stopped breathing. Then I became conscious. I was floating. There was no ceiling or walls, but there was an arched structure that was possibly a tunnel. I was aware of the light energy being bent around me, although this was not a conscious thought at the time. The light was excessively bright. If I had seen this on Earth, it would have burnt my retinas. But it was the most beautiful light and it did not hurt at all. In fact, I would say it was as soft as it was bright. I did not exist as a body, but was energy. I was an energy that was joined to all other energies, those that had been before and those that will be after. I became aware that we are all just energy and we are all intrinsically linked. I recall no sound. Communication was or would have been via telepathy or just knowing. Just knowing feels more appropriate. There is no human word for how amazing and peaceful this state of being feels. I felt like this earth does not exist, nor does anyone in it. If they did exist, I'd be linked to them via energy because we are all one. This place was familiar, like I had been here before. I may have even come from here. I did not want to come back, but was made to come back. I felt myself being pulled back to the operating room. I did not want to come back. I did not want to leave that perfect feeling. I was then on the ceiling of the operating theater, looking down on the proceedings. There were more people in the room. I could see a girl fighting with them as they tried to bring her back to life. The machines would bring her back with a shock, and then she'd kick and punch at them. Then the machines would show her still and lifeless form again. I recall thinking she was a rude and bad girl. I saw her punch a nurse in the face and sprain another nurse's wrist. I realized the girl was me when I was no longer separate from her. I recalled nothing until I woke up the next day. I asked if I had died and was told someone would come to talk to me. Nobody came to talk with me. Then there was a nurse who came onto the ward and I asked, "How is your wrist?" She said, "Still sore. How did you know about that?" I said, "Well, I did it. I saw myself." She replied, "You're right, you did." We talked some more and she confirmed that I had to be resuscitated midway through the surgery. Since that time, No watches would work on me. My heart rate has been erratic. This experience caused me to become exceedingly empathic, picking up on others' feelings and fears. I have had 3 of 4 clear premonitions, but on the whole, I know stuff about people, their motivations and intent. I know what is missing from files and information, so much so that others question how I can know this stuff on a regular basis. Either shortly before or shortly after this experience, I attempted to end myself. I can't quite remember the timing. I was told not to talk about it, so I tried to bury the experience for many years. My mother asked me, while heavily sedated and on her deathbed, if heaven existed because I told her I had been there. I found this odd, as it was not something we talked about, and she frowned upon it as she was a devout Christian. I told her it would be whatever she believed it to be, and it would also be better than anything she could imagine. My father asked me on his deathbed if it was his choice when to die. I told him it was his choice, and he died within 10 minutes after that. At the time of his death, he was clearly having silent conversations with entities I could not see in the room. I had gone to check on him. I thought I heard him and my partner having a conversation. My father was the only one in the room. My partner was asleep in another room. The second person was nowhere to be seen. Yet my father was awake. We had been told he probably had a few months to live. However, I knew I had to stay awake that night. I was aware of my grandmother's death prior to it being called. My grandmother subsequently visited me after her death in 1979 when I was 10 years old. After my NDE incident, I had a vision of my grandfather who died when I was 2 years old. I was able to fully describe the house that he lived in and other family members who were by then deceased. I was aware of my grandfather's death prior to us being contacted about it. This story was shared by Annalise E. and happened in 1985. Story 5. While in the hospital for sepsis, I unknowingly began to experience fibrillation, a heart arrhythmia. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember coming to or waking up, and that I had been somewhere. I told my nurse, "Something just happened to me." What it felt like was that I had been taken somewhere on the side of a cliff, overlooking a valley. Down below was what appeared to be the tops of trees. They were bathed in this golden brown light. In front of me were several beings of light. One communicated with me like thoughts flowing back and forth. I felt love and unconditional regard. The being, whom I'll call a spirit guide, although it could have been an angel, asked me a question. If this marked the end of my life, would I be satisfied with how it went? All I had said and done, and specifically how I responded to what was said and done to me? Almost immediately, I was shown and taken into a large glowing orb, as big as the end of a room. On the outside, it was alive with flashes moving like hot lava. Inside, I was washed over with conversations and interactions from the past. I could see, hear, and feel emotions, including those of others. When I came out of the orb, I answered honestly, as I could sense that was what the being wanted to hear. An honest answer. It and the others seemed to know everything about me but were non-judgmental. So I told it or communicated with it, my thoughts flowing out from the center of my being to its center. No, I would honestly have to say I would not be satisfied, because what I felt most strongly inside the orb was that I had held back, not said what I wanted to, not done the things I wanted out of fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of something unknown, fear of loss. Ordinarily, before this, I would say I was satisfied and had many fulfilling experiences. So I apparently had regrets of which I was unaware. Once I communicated this, I was immediately transported back to my hospital bed. What I gained from osmosis, I guess, simply by being there, wherever it was, that the thing that matters most to them, to heaven, to God, is our relationships with each other, how we treat one another. Nothing else on earth really matters to them there. Not politics, not making money, other than it's a helpful tool. Not the stock market, just how we live with and interact with each other, that we do it well. I also felt flooded with a peace I'd never known. I realized that even as a child, I'd carried a certain weight on my shoulders. All of that was gone. It was absolutely wonderful. Another gift I received by osmosis was the knowledge that life is a gift, a special gift we've each been given. It's up to us to choose how we will live it. We shouldn't rush through it or waste it or wish it away. We only get one, and that's it. Then we move forward. Sometime after this happened, I looked out my hospital window and saw all these beautiful little lights glowing. Hanging there, independently without wires, just glowing, either white or gold like small Christmas lights. I'd never seen anything like them, or since, although I bought something similar online, and it reminded me of this beautiful thing. I remember looking at them a long time, then my eyes getting tired, so I looked down the length of my hospital bed, then back again. They were there for several minutes, I'd say. Then they were gone. Whether they represented the angels or spirit beings, there were maybe a dozen or so, or if it was the portal I went through, I have no idea. I also have no fear of death as a result. It happened quickly. It seemed very far away but took no time to get there. It was as easy as falling off the back of a truck, and it was completely painless. The spirit beings really did seem to have my best interests at heart. They cared about me deeply, even though I had no idea who they were. At some point after I initially shared with my nurse's aide that something had happened, an RN came in, panicky, messing with my heart monitor leads. She asked me, "Did you feel that? Are you feeling anything?" And I didn't. She called some department that does the actual monitoring, asking them to check what was showing up on their end. This was a very large hospital. Whatever happened, it alarmed her sufficiently that she told me she'd be right outside my door, and all I had to do was push the button and she'd come. This story was shared by Kim A. and happened in 2017.